Shift gears now and bring you an update on an estimated 700 Marines who were deployed to Los Angeles last month, where they're now set to leave the city. According to a statement released by the Pentagon yesterday, the troops will be redeployed by the end of the day today. The withdrawal follows the departure of nearly 2,000 California National Guard troops and 150 Specialized Guard firefighters who were sent to the city by President Trump back in June amid some protests over immigration raids. Meanwhile, a second suspect is now in custody this morning after a botched robbery attempt ended with an off-duty Border Patrol officer being shot in the face. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem identified the second suspect, said he came into the U.S. illegally and had been arrested in the past. Joining us now, border czar for the Trump administration, Tom Homan. Good morning, Mr. Homan. Thank you for joining us. Why don't we just start there with the news of the day, that incident in New York City. What more can you tell us about those involved? And I want to ask a second question. Yesterday, you and Secretary Noem were saying this could lead to more federal agents, more ICE agents in New York City, a statement that was greeted with some protests by local officials in New York. Tell us how many and when, what would that look like?
Yeah, I was in New York when this happened. I was there on personal business, but when the shooting occurred, I was notified, so I went to the hospital and visited the officer. He's in bad shape. I mean, when I went there, he was fighting for his life. Of course, he was under heavy sedation, so I didn't get to speak to him. I spoke to his family. His family was in shock. So let's pray he heals. But yeah, it was two illegal aliens approached my moped and tried to commit an armed robbery, not knowing he was an off-duty officer who engaged him in gunfire. So the attempted robber, he's been hit. He's in the hospital, and of course the officer's in the hospital. And what I said at the press conference, this is about sanctuary city policies. I mean, the shooter's been arrested at least 3 or 4 times in New York City for serious crimes, and simply walked out of the precinct because their sanctuary laws don't allow them to contact ICE. If he was booked into Rikers Island, if they actually went that far, book him Rikers Island don't work with ICE either. So I blame the Governor Hochul, her bail reform laws, the changes they made in releasing criminals back to the street right from the precinct. That was a part of it. And the other part of it, sanctuary city laws, where NYPD is not allowed to reach out to ICE and say, hey, we have an illegal alien here. We just arrested for a serious crime, and work with us to not only, when they're done with them, let us take custody, let us deport them.
So, Mr. Homan, could you explain to our viewers that are watching right now why, if somebody committed 2 or 3 crimes and they were sent to Rikers Island, why is it that they could not contact the government to deport somebody who obviously needs to be off the streets of New York or any other American city?
Well, we used to have, Joe, we used to have a presence in Rikers Island. I had a presence there every day, and they were removed from Rikers. I think it was under de Blasio administration. Just removed ICE. They became a sanctuary city, didn't want to work with ICE, so our resources at Rikers were removed. Now, we did have an agreement with Mayor Adams wrote an executive order allowing us back into Rikers Island. However, the city council sued and stopped that, so now it's in litigation, so we're still not in Rikers Island. It makes no sense to me. Why would you not want ICE presence in a jail facility? Because I said this yesterday. Let us arrest the bad guy, the public safety threat that you choose to lock in a jail cell. If he's in the country illegally, let us have access to him at the jail. We're safer for the community, safer for the officer, and safer for the alien. But they'd rather release a illegal alien criminal back into the public, which of course endangers the public, endangers the officer, because now we got to go into the community and find him, which is more dangerous. It causes more resources. Rather than one agent arrest one bad guy in a jail, now we got to send a whole team into his neighborhood to try to find him because he has access to who knows what weapons. It's just foolish that you wouldn't give us access to someone you already locked in a jail cell.
So, Mr. Homan, obviously, this is one of this mass deportation program, one of President Trump's signature campaign promises. But there's been a series of polls lately, including a new one from CBS, in which 56% of those surveyed disapprove of the president's immigration stances. That's a 10-point drop from back in February, blamed by some on some of the in-your-face tactics, the masked ICE agents, the detention centers like Alligator Alcatraz. Why do you think that the majority of Americans right now do not like what they're seeing?
Well, first of all, I don't believe the polls. Second of all, if there's any movement in the polls at all, it's because of the false stories out there about ICE. Like I read in the paper every day that the majority of people in ICE custody are not criminals. Wrong. The majority are criminals, but now the argument is, are they criminal enough? Is a DUI dangerous enough? Well, 10,000 people a year die from DUIs. I think DUI is a crime. So, then you got this whole, back and forth on how serious a crime is it. But I looked at the numbers yesterday. A majority of our criminals have criminal history. Who are the rest of the people in our custody? They're national security threats. They may not have a criminal conviction, but they're national security threats based on intelligence reports. For instance, ICE arrests over 200 Iranian nationals that are currently in custody. Yeah, they're not documented criminals, but they're national security threats. They need to be detained. There's also what we call expedited removal cases. There are certain immigration arrests that we make within the confines of the border within 2 years that we process through expedited removal, which by statute, by federal law, we're required to detain. So that the media just isn't telling the truth about who we're in detention. On the second part of that, I see all the stories that the majority of people ICE arrests are not criminals. That's a fake story. We are prioritizing criminals and public safety threats, but who are the other people you see us arresting? Fugitives, those who had due process at great taxpayer expense. A federal judge ordered them removed. Rather than leaving, they became a fugitive and they're in the wind. The law requires us to execute those removal orders. That's a job for ICE. If a federal judge orders them removed, we are supposed to remove them. So we're removing final orders. And again, who else we're out there arresting? National security threats that may not have a criminal conviction, but we're required to arrest them and detain them and remove them. So I think the media is purposely giving misinformation to American people what ICE is doing and is raising the rhetoric. And because of this false narrative that's being pushed out about ICE, that's why it feeds the rhetoric, the negative rhetoric. And that's why we have an 800% increase in violence against ICE officers. People need to know that ICE officers are simply enforcing the laws that Congress enacted. And you got members of Congress out there comparing ICE to Nazis and to racists and to terrorists. They're simply enforcing laws that Congress enacted. So if ICE is, if they're racist for enforcing the law, what's that make members of Congress who wrote the law? It's just ridiculous, and the rhetoric has to be tapped down, or we're going to see more violence. I said 2 months ago, if the rhetoric didn't decrease, there would be bloodshed, and there has been. One man was killed trying to ambush a Border Patrol facility. He died. Another group of people tried to ambush an ICE facility, and one officer was shot in the neck. This rhetoric has to stop. The truth needs to come out. The men and women of ICE are simply doing their job enforcing the law that Congress enacted. And I want to leave it with this. People need to understand the men and women of ICE, I was one. I came up through the ranks. They're mothers and fathers too. And they see terrible things every single day. So they don't hang their heart on a hook every day they go to work. These are men and women who are out there trying to make this country safer and concentrating on those public safety threats and making this country safe again.
Right, and we don't have time. I know we're outside the window. Don't have time to go over all the things you just said. But obviously, as we've said on this show repeatedly, any violence against any law enforcement officers just absolutely inexcusable. I do want to ask if you can stay around really quickly for one quick question. There are a lot of Americans that are like me who believe our border's there for a reason. That we have borders for a reason, and I've been critical of permissive policies on illegal immigration for a very long time. I believe that we should, the most humane way possible, deport those who came here illegally. But a lot of Americans like me are very concerned when we see people in plain clothes, uniforms, wearing masks, not marked, not identified, grabbing people off the streets. I understand the concern that you're talking about. Violence, reported violence against ICE agents up. And again, inexcusable. How do we get to a point, though, where we don't have masked ICE agents or other masked federal agents without markings, clear markings on there, whether it's ICE or whether it's FBI or whatever it is? So because we all have sons and daughters, and we don't, my daughter had people coming up to her in masks, throwing her into a car, I would say fight like hell. But of course here, though, if it's law enforcement officers, you would say do what the law enforcement officers tell you to do. How do we fix that? How do we balance those interests of protecting ICE officers, but also letting the person being apprehended know this is a law enforcement officer, do what they say?
Well, Joe, I've been doing this for over 40 years. I started on board in 1984, and I'm out on the streets every week with these teams. And yeah, they are masked, trying to protect their, themselves and their families because they're being doxxed. Their spouses are being doxxed. Their children are being doxxed. This modern technology, you can find out where everybody's family is. So they wear the mask in self-protection, but they do wear identifiers. I've never been in an operation and I've seen any officer who hasn't got an HSI patch or an ERO patch, an ICE patch, an FBI, DEA patch. They all have patches. And when they approach somebody, the first thing they do is identify themselves as an ICE officer or as an FBI agent, a DEA agent.
You think they should do that? Because I've seen videos of a woman being taken off the street. I think it was a Tufts student, a foreign student, that had like 5 or 6 people without uniforms on. Your position is they should, even if they're covered to protect their identity, their family's identity, they should have markings on their uniform, right?
Yeah, well, if they're in tactical gear, they have markings on uniform. If they're in plain clothes, like I am right now, then they show identification, tell me who they are, that they're not, I'm an officer with ICE, a special agent with ICE. They identify themselves and identify that person and let them know why they're being detained. I mean, that is just standard operating procedure. I mean, I know you see there's a lot of videos out there. It's hard to tell, exactly what's happening in every video, but I'm telling you the way these officers are trained. And I've been on the streets every week since January 20th with these teams, and they have either identified themselves or they're in plain clothes, or the tactical gear they're wearing is clearly marked. But the masks, I think, are important. How do we get rid of the mask? Stop the hateful rhetoric. Assaults on ICE officers are up over 800%. And I specifically mean members of Congress. If members of Congress can compare ICE to the Nazis, that gives some of those people on the far left that the out of control people, it emboldens them to take action. I'm just asking to let's stop the hateful rhetoric. And if you question what ICE does, then let's go to Congress and talk about the immigration law and what changes are needed. But again, they're simply enforcing the law that they're required to enforce and uphold the oath they took to enforce those laws.
Yeah, that's what I used to say about IRS agents. If you don't like what the IRS is doing, talk to members of Congress. They're the ones that pass the laws. So I understand what you're saying, and certainly if there's markings, then understand the balancing act on the masks as well. It's Border Czar Tom Homan. Thank you so much for being with us. We greatly appreciate it.